So are we live? Can we go ahead and start the meeting?
On you.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to More City Business. As we start off 2021, appreciate everybody's patience. I'm going to call to order the January 11th, 2021 meeting of the Real Estate Committee. And I'm going to ask Councilmember Jackson if she would mind leading us either into an invocation or a moment of silence. Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, let's pray, please. Just bow your heads with me. Lord, we thank you that this is a day that you have given us. Help us to live into it, to honor and bring glory to your name, to do the citizens of Charleston, the public service that we are elected to do and hired to do. I thank you for those who are representing their clientele here to carry out the business of this committee, and we ask that we do it all in your name.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Get off on a good start. So
Yeah.
item A of our agenda is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute on behalf of the city to release a use restriction and reverter clause. So Chip, are you taking this first item as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And this is I'm going to pull up my share screen. The city owned property back in 1965, 14.18 acres, or excuse me, the USA really owned it. And the city had held a possibility reverter and a use restriction on it. It traded its possibility reverter and use restriction on that property for a possibility reverter and use restriction on 7.78 acres of property, which is going to be shown on this plat here. I've outlined where city is. This is located in North Charleston. The TMS, can you all see the TMS map? I always, sometimes GIS map.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This long parcel here, this is Remount Road, North Rhett, the terminals over this way. But this property here it's owned by the Ports Authority. It's consists of about 10.07 acres that the SPA proposes to sell to the owner or to the lessee of the cold storage warehouse facility that's been built in the last few years on it. They're going to sell it. I think they asked for permission from the state accountability office for $16.5 million. The city, my estimation is that the city holds a possibility reverter and a use restriction on about somewhere between 4.5 and 5 acres of the property. The city's held that since 1965. The possibility reverter essentially provides that if the Ports Authority stops operating port facilities in the city of Charleston, this property and all the other property conveyed by the city to the Ports Authority will revert to the city. The likelihood of that happening is very small. I've done research on it. It's a remote possibility, and even in condemnation actions, a possibility reverter, unless it's probable that it's going to be triggered in the near future, holds very little value. The use restriction restricts the city's, what I'll call the city's portion of the property, the 4.5 to 5 acres, to uses related to port facilities, terminals, or wharves. According to the Ports Authority, it will continue to be used for such. There is a cold storage warehouse building on it. The purchaser is a cold storage warehouse business. There's, just so you know, that if you kind of zoom in here, these are both railroads. The new purchaser will actually get an easement over the railway on this portion of the property, which is also subject to the city's possibility reverter, but will not be sold under this transaction or triggered by the transaction. The purchaser's lender has asked that the city release the possibility reverter and the use restriction in order for them to lend the money to the purchaser. We negotiated with the Ports Authority and came up with a figure of $350,000. We do not have an appraisal. There was some time pressure on it, and we would not have gotten an appraisal within the time that Ports Authority wants to close. I mentioned my research and the possibility of a reverter. I think normally with a use restriction, you'd value the land and then value the land without the use restriction, value the land with the use restriction, and subtract the two to figure out the value of the use restriction. Here, it's really more of a time value of money situation, because assuming the sale were to go through and the lender, they found another lender, they don't really need the city to release its use restriction, at least not in the near future, if they're going to get the full value of the use of the warehouse. So it's really not about the value of the present value of the use restriction. It's more about what the city's willing to give for to allow the transaction to go forward now, as opposed to sitting on their possibility and their use restriction in the future. I think I've kind of gone into detail about it. We do retain our possibility reverter and use restriction on the other parcels, which include a rail parcel. And then there's a 1.89 acre parcel that's part of this this larger tract here that won't be part of the purchase, and we'll still own that. And SPA has mentioned, Jim Newsom has mentioned, can we go ahead and get rid of that? So we'll continue discussions with him about that one. But this is just for the 4.5 to 5 acres subject to reverter here.
Chip, thank you for that update. And let me just clarify a couple of points. We do not own the land. We're not a title owner. We
No,
just
sir.
have this reverter right to it. And I just want to clarify, because I was writing notes, it was 7.78 acres, but our interest is only as to the 4.55 acres of that 7.78. That's correct?
Yeah. Yes, sir. And the newest plat is this plat here, and the rail parcel. What I'm basically doing is subtracting to get to 5.1 would be the most. To get to 5.1, I would subtract the 2.77 from the 7.78. But when this was all resurveyed, there's a little bit less than 7.78 acres. So it's somewhere between 4.5 and 5.1 is what I should say. So, yeah.
And the reverter kicks in only in the event the state's Ports Authority quit doing business in the city of Charleston.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I looked at the previous reverter and it was the same. So it wasn't a drafting error in writing it that way.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion that we approved item number A. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Oh,
Hey, Councilman
second.
Waring,
Second.
good seeing you. All right. Any further discussion by any members of the committee as to this item number A?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question, just superficial.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McQueenie, can you go over again? Why did the city have this reverter?
It's interesting. I was trying to chase down the line of, the rundown, how we ended up with the property, but we owned 14 acres that was part of the port terminal property I just showed you a minute ago, with the 1.89 acres is part of now.
Right.
That was transferred from the SPA from the Ports Authority to the USA in 1965, and we swapped our reverter on that for the SPA property. The city owned like 460 acres before it was North Charleston, but in North Charleston, most of the West Virginia pulp and paper property. It's interesting going, it was a part of it was seized by the United States government, both in World War I and World War II, and then reconveyed back to the city. But it's also very, from a history perspective, I don't know how many people know this. When the old Charleston Terminal Company that operated the port, I think it was in the 20s, went under, the city really stepped in and purchased that property. We issued bonds, and I think we issued bonds for like $3 million. We paid $1.5 million for all of the port property. I believe that runs from essentially Union Pier. It's not all of it now, but up to the North Charleston area. properties. And then the legislature many years later stepped in and set up the South Carolina Ports Authority to take it over from the city. The Port Utilities Commission had been set up and it was struggling. It was bleeding money, and the state kind of came in and said, thanks for saving us 20 years ago. We're going to do it now. So that's kind of that's why there's so many transactions between the city and the Ports Authority.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
By the way, if y'all don't know this, but Chip moonlights also as our unofficial historian.
I find this stuff interesting, even though
you do, and you do a magnificent job of handling that. And but it was really interesting. You did that with our other ordinance on the Planning Commission, how you went through that
yes,
whole historical content about doing that. Mr. Mayor, I forget you had your hand up.
So this part of the history is somewhat conjectural on my part, but Chip, go back to that aerial or TMS map showing the northern part of the North Charleston terminal, where we still have the 1.8 acres or whatever.
Yes, sir. It's like
It's
right
right
there.
along there. So the property just above there that says whole for some reason, and I just know this because I took an extensive tour of the Joint Base Charleston a couple of years ago, but that property is part of the Joint Base Charleston and serves the U.S. Army Depot. I don't know if y'all know, but they supply these roving ships of supplies around the globe for mobile operations for the U.S. military. And I'm betting that that was part of the original acreage that the city must have deeded to the U.S. government when they were finalizing all the property for the Navy base, and they wanted to have some deep water access, and the city must have accommodated that to occur. I'd bet a lot, not a lot of money on that, but it kind of makes sense to me. And so the bottom line, though, as where we are right now, is admittedly an obscure a reverter clause that would likely never be triggered. We have negotiated a value of $350,000 for the city's benefit, and honestly, I think it's a fair number. They thought it was a little too much, and we thought it wasn't quite enough. And so when that happens, I think you got a fair number. And so I think we have a lot of need for other real estate transactions, and we're going to talk about another one of those in just a minute. But I recommend approval, and I feel like it's a good deal for the city. Thanks to staff for helping put this all together.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else have a comment or question? Councilmember Appel's had a thumb up or?
This is all very, very good work by Chip to get to the bottom of this. And I know how thorny and complicated these title issues can be. And just want to say, great work. I'm glad we got you working for us, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other comments, questions? I do think that this is a fair resolution. We're relinquishing any kind of cloud or claim we may have on this property. They can move forward with its sale. And this is a discussion that we had during our budget committee meetings about getting rid of excess property that's not income producing and serves no other public use for the city. And we're going to bank $350,000. That's a pretty good deal for our citizens. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor of item number A, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Very good. Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for y'all's hard work on putting this together. And somebody was not taking too much of a Christmas break if this was going on during the month of December. Item B is a discussion and action regarding an alternate location of Dominion Energy utility switchgear at 179 Nassau. Who's taking that on for us this afternoon?
Councilmember Shade, I'm not sure that we are ready to move forward on that. I was seeing if Julia was on the line. But it's my understanding that we need to defer this matter.
All right. Any opposition to deferring item number B? Mr. Mayor?
Well, I thought we were just going to have an update on this. I didn't know we were needing to take action, but to tell y'all in a very thumbnail sketch, you know how we approved some funds a year or two ago? Oh, Gianna's online, could probably explain this better than I can. Gianna, do you mind?
No, sir, I don't. Councilmember Shade and members of the Real Estate Committee, the purpose of this is such that we can get the James Lewis Jr. apartments built. There is a switch box that we need to relocate. And so the proposal was to have this located to a property that the city owns. And so between our design staff and Dominion Energy, we are looking at the best location for that. And that is really what this discussion is about. We know we have to locate it somewhere. There was a portion of the property where the buildings will go that we were looking at initially, and then staff thought it was more appropriate to locate it here. So we wanted you all to be aware that that discussion is being had and that we will need to decide very soon where we actually locate that box. And Mayor, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything further.
How much space do you need for that box, by the way?
Now that Councilmember Shade, I cannot answer, and I'm certainly glad to get that information back to you before the council meeting tomorrow. That's more of an Alan Davis question, and hopefully he has the answer to that. But I know that our staff has been working very closely with Danny Cassis and the engineer for the James Lewis Jr. apartment developers to make sure that that happens fairly quickly.
Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman Waring, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thanks. I guess you won't know this thing if you don't know the size. I just wonder whether it would affect the number of affordable units to be built there. The answer is no. Okay, great.
It will not affect the units. The plan is in place or approved for the unit count. And I think that's why they're being very attentive to make sure that placement is appropriate so that it does not adversely impact the design of the building, because that has been approved.
You know, the next question that I asked, I don't want y'all to assign me to be executed for this question I'm about to ask next, but you remember we in the process of swapping property with the Humanities Foundation to help create that affordable housing. So the property that we've taken on, I'm just wondering whether, I know it's low, but maybe it could be built up to accommodate the switching station. It's just a thought. I'm just throwing it out there. You know.
I'm not sure that we're quite ready there, and this will hopefully move faster than that is moving.
Oh, okay.
So we need to get this taken care of in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Gianna, we don't need to make any vote on this right now, and we can wait till our next real estate
Yes,
committee
sir.
meeting. So we're essentially just discussing this. There's no action taken at this point.
Correct. Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay, I think Councilwoman Jackson had her hand up first, Mr. Mayor, then I'll come right back to you. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you, Mayor. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, well, I mean, timing was basically my question. Is it okay to wait for the next meeting, or do you want us to do some sort of action that would, trust the staff and the client or the partner to builder to figure this out? Do we actually need to hear this when you come to conclude?
I think we're okay in waiting till the next meeting, Councilwoman Jackson. I'm not sure if this is coming back to you all in the form of an easement or what the agreement itself will look like between the city and Dominion Energy. We did a similar deal when we helped to facilitate the Grace Homes that Don Cameron's office built, and you all were able to do it for us fairly quickly. And so I will reach out to the staff that's been directly engaged and make sure that we're ready for the next real estate committee meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
did you want
I
to?
was just going to, I happen to have an email that has a drawing of this, if y'all want to see it real briefly.
Sure, you could do our,
Let's see if it works.
Yeah. It should be on item B of our agenda is a diagram showing this.
Huh. Oh, you got it in your agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, never mind.
Okay.
Did my Zoom screen come up for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
a bunch of
Your
other stuff.
drawing.
Yeah, your whole screen showed up.
It did, Mayor.
Sorry about that.
Don't take credit for it. It's impressive.
Yes.
That's right.
So you could do that. That's very good.
All right.
But now you have to unshare so we can go back to our other items.
Yeah, now I don't know how to unshare it.
There you go. All right. All right. So item B we had a discussion on that, and we'll defer further discussion and any action until our next real estate committee meeting later this month. Action item number C deals with the School of Law and then sale of 431 Meeting Street. Susan, you go take this on. You're nodding your head. So
I'm going to take this one on. I'm not going to share my screen with you because I think everybody's familiar with this property. It's at the intersection of Meeting and Wolf Streets. And there's a long history to this. This is transaction actually started in 2005. I thought I would give a quick background to the new council members regarding the ins and outs of this deal and how we got to this point, which is, I think, a very good point to be at. I noticed on the call, we've got Capers Barr. I think Adam Barr may also be on here, as well as Bill Kraber and RJ Quinlan for the Charleston School of Law. Capers and Adam, I believe, represent the buyer. And I'm sure they're available to answer any questions after I'm finished. Just real briefly, as some of you may know, this is the Charleston School of Law property, as I said, at Meeting and Wolf Streets. The city sold the property to the Charleston School of Law in 2005 and envisioned at that point that it was going to be the permanent campus for the law school. In consideration and Mayor Riley wanted to keep the law school on the peninsula downtown, the city agreed to sell the property at a 25% discount. The purchase price then of $865,000 was financed. Charleston School of Law took a mortgage and also a note that was payable to the city. Charleston School of Law paid the interest on that note over the years, and the note was extended several times. But it was the last extension was about to expire in July of 2017. I should note that when the property was conveyed, it was subject to the possibility of a reverter that would be triggered if the property was not used for law school purposes. So in 2017, before the expiration of the last extension on the note, the Charleston School of Law, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think this is clear on the record, Charleston School of Law realized that the property may not be a good fit for them for their law school. I think that they were growing faster than they had anticipated back in 2005. So they came to the city and asked for some options to consider being able to either sell or exchange the property. But in doing so, they needed to deal with the reverter if in fact they were going to be able to sell the property or exchange it. So basically in 2017, City Council entered into an agreement on how to value the reverter. And let me step back. I mean, I think the city felt that they did not want to impede the School of Law from going forward with its plans. The intent was that it would stay on the peninsula, but understood that its needs had changed over time. So the question was, how was the reverter going to be valued in the event that the property was sold or exchanged? And basically a formula was devised, which basically said that the cost of the note would be repaid but also that the city would receive 25% of the net proceeds from the sale of the property or exchange. And by net, the calculation was after appraisals, deed stamp, real estate commissions. The agreement in 2017 also provided that any money that the city would receive by releasing the reverter would go to affordable housing. And that was a provision that was in the 2017 agreement. That 2017 agreement was approved by City Council, but was not incorporated into an ordinance. So one of the things we're doing today is basically having City Council bless through the ordinance that 2017 agreement. Moving forward in 2019, the agreement that was entered into 2017 was expiring. And City Council made the decision not to extend the agreement. And so what happened at that point was the agreement changed into a different provision of the agreement came into effect. And it basically, in 2017, it provided that if the city should decide not to extend the agreement, then the note would be due upon the termination of the agreement, but that the formula, basically the 25% formula that would be calculated for the sale or exchange of the property, would still live on. So in 2019, the city did not extend the agreement with the Charleston School of Law. Charleston School of Law went ahead and paid off the note and mortgage, and the city received $865,000 at that point in time. So what has happened since then is there is now a buyer, Shura, who is ready to close on the property. And so that takes us into the provision in the 2017 agreement that talks about how we calculate what the city receives as consideration for releasing the possibility of reverter. And basically what the agreement provides is that the city is entitled to 25% of the net proceeds of the sale, then of course minus the money that we had already received from having paid off the note, the $865,000. So where we are now is that Shura and the Charleston School of Law are ready to close, and they need from us, as provided in the 2017 agreement, our approval to give them a quitclaim deed that releases the possibility of reverter. And at the same time, we receive the consideration for releasing the possibility, the reverter. And attached, so we've got in your packet, which we're asking for approval, a first reading, is an ordinance that authorized the mayor to go ahead and execute the quitclaim deed and the elimination of the possibility of reverter, and to execute any other necessary documents to allow the closing to go forward. There is, and maybe most importantly, attached as Exhibit 1 to this ordinance is the distribution of the proceeds that show the sales price of the transaction between the Charleston School of Law and the buyer. And then we also have, and I don't know if everyone has it in front of them or not, but it also sets forth the commission, stamps, and appraisals, which comes off the top of the transaction. So if you go to the right, you'll see the city's portion, and 25% of this sale, the city's share would be $34,492.09. They've already paid off the note. And then back in April of 2020, the city received $166,250 from Charleston School of Law and Shura, which was our share of the money that Shura paid to extend the inspection period on the property. So if you go through all those calculations, basically at closing, the city is due $3,242.09. So we think that this is obviously a fair deal. We think the timing of it is wonderful for the city, given our financial situation, and therefore requesting approval of the first reading of the ordinance, and giving the mayor the authority to execute the necessary documents to allow this closing to go forward.
Thank you, Susan. That was a very well detailed and exhaustive explanation. And
am I getting to sound like Chip? I'm just trying to figure out if I'm getting close to Chip's level of, detail.
I do want to recognize our fellow members of our Charleston County Bar, William Craver, Capers Bar, and his partner son as well on the Zoom call. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the call. Council members, committee members, I'll entertain a motion to approve item C. Do I have a motion?
I'll approve, as Ms. Herdina explained, that we need to authorize the mayor to execute a quick claim deed and expunge the reverter, whatever that looks like.
I'll take that as a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'm gonna second it for discussion.
Okay.
Ms. Herdina, what is?
Seconded, so you want to go into discussion, Mr. Councilman?
I do.
Okay.
What's the sales price of this property, Ms. Herdina? I don't have my agenda.
$12,850,000.
And is it still I guess anticipated that a hotel is gonna come here?
That's my understanding, but I guess I defer to Capers or to Bill on that issue.
I'll be glad to address it if you'd like.
Yes, sir, Mr. Barr, if you don't mind. You represent the potential buyer for the property?
Yes, we represent Shara Hotel Group out of Charlotte. And Councilmember Appel, you may remember this from your days on the Board of Zoning Appeals, because this transaction represents a very good day for affordable housing, because in addition to what we've already heard goes to affordable housing from the actual sale, Councilmember Appel, you may remember that this approval for this hotel was appealed by the Historic Charleston Foundation. And that went to circuit court, but was never heard because we settled it. And a part of the settlement was that our clients on Shara agreed to bring this project into substantial compliance with the then newly adopted accommodations ordinance. It was approved under the old one. So it means that in addition to the $2 million that goes to affordable housing under the release of reverter, Shara pledged to pay $5.10 a square foot payable to affordable housing as well. That's about 198,000 square feet. It's roughly another $1 million that will be paid into the Affordable Housing Fund before the C of O is issued when the construction of this project is complete. So it's that might be an aspect that not all of you were aware of, in addition to what Ms. Herdina first presented. This may well be the last hotel to be built in the, what did we call this? The hotel district. There you go.
Bennett box, they referred to it as.
There you go. Exactly. So I don't know, Councilmember Waring, I don't know whether that addressed your questions.
Well, this goes back, a couple of years, and I have to be frank. When I sat on the real estate committee at the time and council, and when we agreed to that reverter at 25%, we didn't know the sales price was going to be $12 million. And that left a lot of salt in the wounds when we found that out in the newspaper. So, and that's why we voted as a real estate committee, and I don't know whether it came forth to council or not to extend that agreement, because we felt that 25%, the majority of us on the time at the real estate committee didn't feel that that was enough, because the 25% was sufficient. It created a lot of salty feelings, quite frankly. So now it's coming back again, basically the same amount. If council members at that time had known that price was going to be, remember now the property was supposed to revert back if it wasn't going to be used for the law school purposes. Also, Mayor Rowley and that council, which my father sat on, gladly reduced the price to enable the law school, which was very young at the time, to expand its footprint. So when the property doesn't come back, and obviously goes for exponential amount more, again, we found out that that 25% was being applied to a $12 million fee in the newspaper. I found it out in the newspaper, and I wasn't alone at the time. So it appears to me that we have a second opportunity, or we have a second crack at this. I second this motion. I don't know what the pleasure is going to be for the entire council, because I hadn't talked to anybody else, but I will not be voting for this, because I feel the same now as I did then, that to allow this property, number one, if it reverted back to the city, we could use the whole property for affordable housing, Mr. Barr. So the additional $510 for that, I don't find that being an attractive opportunity for the city or its taxpayers. So I will not be voting in favor of this one, because it's basically the same deal, that with the exception of what you just explained, at that time, the $5.10 per square foot for the affordable housing was not a part of it at the time that we voted to remove the reverter clause. So, hey, listen, for a piece of property that would have come back to the city, if it's not used for a law school, for us to walk away with $3 million on a $12 million transaction, I think is unfair. I think taxpayer is not being treated fairly on that. So that's my feeling on it.
Thank you, Councilmember Waring. Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, do you want to go first? I go to Councilmember Jackson after you.
If you don't mind, and I certainly understand, Councilmember Waring, your concerns and your position. I do want to just point out two things. One is the payments thus far, including when the note was paid off, the $865,000. We did dedicate those funds as well. I'm pretty sure Gianna could verify this for me, that they went into our pool of funding for affordable housing. But more importantly, and in a way, it kind of reminds me of what we just approved a few minutes ago. The reverter for the property had not been triggered. And Mr. Cravers on the line could probably assure us that the School of Law had no intention of letting the reverter get triggered, that they would have just held the property and used it for some other purpose. I remember at the time a claim was made they could even use it for a parking lot and maintain the ownership of the property, and we never would have gotten a dime. And so you might say, well, we kind of gotten a squeeze play on this, but you know, agreements had been made years ago about the reverter and what it said. And so we ended up at the end of the day, if we approve this today, between the note payment, the $2 million, and the fee, garnering about $4 million total for affordable housing. And the alternative, frankly, would have been we would have gotten nothing. So I mean, I hear your point when you see that big sales price number, But again, that's money that I don't feel like we ever would have achieved otherwise. So respectfully, I think we should support this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Jackson, I'll come back
Thank
to
you. I think the mayor is referring to, my question is more about what options do we have if we would choose not to vote in favor of this quick claim deed? What happens to the agreement? What happens to the property?
Ms. Sordina, you want to respond to that question?
Well, I mean, the agreement that's been approved by council sets this mechanism in place. So, I mean, we would be out of compliance with that agreement that's already been approved by council if we would not approve this, frankly.
So
There's one council member, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. I mean, some
Yes,
people in
ma'am.
the past have said, how did we come up with the 25%? Or how was that number reached? And I went back and I looked at the minutes from the past on that, and how that was reached was basically, again, the city initially decreased the sale to Charleston School of Law, the sales price by 25%. And so it was thought that the fair thing to do is, if it were sold or exchanged, that the city would recover a sum that equaled that 25%.
So I'm gonna give it to Councilmember Moran in a second, but I just want to clarify that point, Ms. Sordina, that the sales price to the school at the time, we reduced the price by 25%. So this is, I hate to use the word making us whole, but it sounds like we're getting back to almost where we would have been at the time of the sale, not the value of the property right now. Is that a fair statement?
Basically, that was the rationale for the 25% number, as I understand it. You know, Bill or others who've been involved in this from the beginning may have, you know, some additional thoughts on that, but that's what the record reflects, is how that 25% was agreed upon.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Waring, you wanted to,
Actually, if my memory serves me right, the city of Charleston sold it to the law school for less than what the city paid for it, as an encouragement for this law school to expand in that location. So it was always anticipated not for a hotel to be there, but for, I guess, expansion of the law school to be there. I happened to, and Mr. Mayor was a realtor at the time, but I happened to be chair of the chamber when the property on Mary Street was sold to the law school to enable the law school to move there. Actually, I sat down with Judge Saunders and it was Judge Costa, or whatever, I think that was his name.
it was the magistrate, George.
That's right, and negotiated the sale price.
Right.
So it was me, and they had a gentleman named what's the attorney? Is it Westbrook?
Ed Westbrook.
Yeah.
Ed Westbrook, one of the smartest persons I've ever come across in my life. So, and at the time, believe it or not, at the time, and you can ask Mr. Barr, ask Mayor Rowley, he wasn't in favor of selling that Mary Street to the law school at the time. But anyway, things worked out, and law school has been a good partner with the city of Charleston and the business community. So, but so that deal that the law school got on that property was, again, for its expansion. And when we found out about the 12 million, I still say it was salt, it created salt, because I would doubt, I can speak for myself, you can speak to those on council at the time, had we known the price was 12 million, would we have agreed to 25% cut for the taxpayers? I know I would not have agreed for a 25% cut for the taxpayers. So, and if this is the agreement and we can't do anything about it, why come back to council? I think we have some leverage in to negotiate a better opportunity for the taxpayers. So that's my my piece on that. Had I known 2 years ago that the price was $12 million, I would not have agreed to that 25%. Now, they still need us. I still think the city should get more than 25% of this transactional amount. So I understand, Mr. Mayor, we have a difference on that. So that's why we have discussions one way or the other. And the part about the affordable housing, I think that's a noble negotiation. But the fact is, if this property came back to the city, affordable housing could go on the whole site. So, and as far as it being a parking lot, I don't know, I guess the legal question that's above my pay, but could they have used it for parking a lot when under the original goal was for them to expand and put a building there for ever and a day. And they still would have had to pay the mortgage off anyway. So the $865,000 would have eventually been paid anyway, even if it were a parking lot. So
That's true.
I disagree on this one. So that's my position on that one. So.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the comments and well taken. Mr. Craver, is there anything you want to add?
Councilman Shade, that the only thing that I would add was in 2019, when the school paid off the note, the school and the city entered into a modification of the possibility of reverter that was approved by the real estate committee and then went to council and was also approved by council. And we slightly adjusted the agreement, but at that time, the city, the School of Law had a potential sale of over $10 million on the property, and the real estate committee knew about that.
No, sir. We did not know about that. I was on that committee at that time. We found out that sale price in the newspaper, and the people who are no longer on that paper are still in town. You can ask them yourself. Now, you may have conveyed that to others, but not to this sitting member who was on the committee then and now. That price was not discussed.
So this is actually a different buyer, and it is a little bit higher price, but the 25% deal was again ratified and put on the public record at that time. So I'm at a little bit of a loss how we're back at wanting to renegotiate this deal.
Well, we're back at a loss because full disclosure wasn't made originally. Now, I'm not saying by you, I'm talking about to the council.
Mr. Barr, did you want to add something to this?
I do. When council acted on it, I guess it was in 2019, and agreed to the modification of reverter, of the possibility of reverter. I don't believe that was done by ordinance. And there is a state statute which requires that an ordinance can only be amended by ordinance. And the original sale to the Charleston School of Law was ratified by ordinance. So this gets very technical. So whereas council approved what we're talking about here today, it did not actually enact an ordinance. And that creates a title issue for us. And so I think somebody, council member Waring, you might have asked the question, why are we back here? It's because I think by inadvertence, when it was previously approved, it was not done by ordinance. And I recognize that you all are here looking out for the city's interests and for the city's business, and that's your job, is what you should be doing. But I will say this, that my client from a fairly small company from Charlotte, Shara, has invested an awful lot into this project with the expectation and in reliance that what the city had actually recorded, the city would back up. Now, the modification of the possibility of reverter, which was ratified in 2019, was actually recorded in the RMC office, but it had not been enacted by ordinance, and it should have been enacted by ordinance. And so the answer to the question why we're here is because the city should go back to do the right thing and confirm by ordinance what it already confirmed by written agreement.
So it sounds like a ratification of our prior act.
Say again?
It sounds like a ratification of our prior act.
That's correct. It's almost
would
like a
agree.
nunc-pro-tunc adoption of what you did before. And
I'm sorry.
and I recall the conversation now that Councilmember Waring, you're recalling from back then. I recall that as having happened, but I recognize again that you're here looking out for the city's business, but I think in this circumstance, particularly because council approved this in 19, but just didn't do it by ordinance, the right thing to do is to do what should have been done then.
Thank you for that explanation. I think one of the other questions, I'll come back to you in a minute, Councilman Waring. One of the other questions, and Mr. Craver, you can maybe touch upon this, is that there was a concern because the original intent of this transaction was to keep the school of law in the city on the peninsula. Since the school of law has decided that they're not going to use this property, can you represent to us the school of law's intent to remain at its current location or within the sort of the basic perimeters of its current location?
That's the School of Law's intent, is to stay on the peninsula. And that was part of the discussion in 2017 and in 2019 was, the city wanted to make sure that the School of Law was going to stay on the peninsula, and it says it will.
And I know that we have a new man at the helm. Mr. Bell has moved in to sort of redirect the ship a little bit. And I think that he's been successful with his endeavors with the school too. So the financial health of the school has improved over the past couple of years as well.
Yes, it has.
Okay, Councilman Waring, you had your hand up again, so.
Well, I did, I don't think we need to go back and forth on this one. I mean, I obviously respect Mr. Barr, but you say we ratified it, but it was as I understand it, we got a different buyer now and a different sales price. So it's not the exact same thing that we refer back to in 19. So I think we need to talk again on this one, but because frankly, it was very embarrassing when it was in the newspaper what the city portion was out of this contract. And then when we found out again, the price at that time, it's bad when you make a decision when you don't have all the information to make the decision on it, especially when you represent others. And that's what we are. We represent others on this council. And I know what it is to represent people, being a financial advisor, helping people to manage their money. You have to do what is prudent. The piece I previously mentioned, and I'm just being repetitive now, had we known that price, I would not have voted for 25%. Now, those who were in council at the time who agreed with that, because I remember having that discussion, they're no longer on council. So I guess I'm the lone wolf that remembers that, but that's where we are on this one. So I've had my piece on this, and should it come forward to council, I'll have the opportunity to speak again. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Appel, Councilmember Appel, you had your hand.
Thank you, Chairman Shayad. And, Councilmember Waring's brought up some issues that frankly I was completely unaware of regarding any of this. Of course, I wasn't on council in 2019. And, I'd like to have a closer look at this. I'd like to look at the 2017 agreement. I'd like to look at the 2019 agreement. I'd like to know for sure what information was communicated to council at all times relevant. I mean, this is big money, and we have a big responsibility here. And I don't want to prejudge anything because I wasn't around for it. But based upon what I've been able to look at, which is essentially just what was in our agenda packet. I would feel a lot more comfortable moving forward with this if I had the benefit of looking at the actual documents, being able to put my eyes on them and link that up with the various communications relevant to price, offers, things of that nature, so we can make absolutely sure that what we're doing right now is in the best interest of the taxpayers. And that's not to suggest that what is on the table right now is not in the best interest of us. I mean, I think the way Mayor Tecklenburg lined up, the money that's coming to the city, that's already come to the city, that all sounds great. But I just would certainly be a lot more comfortable if we were able to take a closer look at this. And perhaps we could defer this and use that intervening time to get some more information, or perhaps we can move it forward today, and then maybe between now and tomorrow get some more of this information. I'm open to all options, but I've got a little hesitation now based upon some of the things I'm hearing.
Mr. Mayor?
I just point out that since we're now doing this by ordinance, we'll just be giving this first reading. And so we'll need to come back in 2 weeks for second and third reading. And I would propose that would be plenty of time for Councilmember Appel or any other council members to look at those prior agreements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, any further discussion?
We certainly are available to do whatever anybody wants us to do to provide information and have discussions.
Okay.
I do have some additional discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If you move this forward, we're going to continue to have this discussion in the public square, just like we're having it today.
Correct.
Actually, Councilman Appel brings up a good point. I think if you deferred this, these discussions could be held, I think, in a better environment that they should be held in. I'm willing to go either way, though. So if you're willing to delay it 2 weeks and kind of vet this out, or if you want to push it through, we just got through with a huge deficit, and this doesn't involve the people representing the sellers on this, but the transaction. Mr. Bond, Mr. Craven, in 19, we worked our way through a little bit better north of a $38 million deficit. We just went to the taxpayers to ask them for a tax increase for the 21 budget. And this transaction, again, I just don't think is fair to the taxpayers. So I think we need to have some maybe push back, think about what's been said, and maybe bring this one back. But I'm only one vote. So if you want to carry it forward, majority rules, but I'm going to vote against this.
Now, Councilman Warren, if you start fussing at me that we ran into your Public Works and Utilities Committee time.
I know, and you're going to get fined, by the way.
I'm going to put this all back on you, okay? All right. So what I would suggest that we do what the mayor requested. This is just a first reading. Let's vote on it, and we can delay if we need to the second or third reading until we get the information that Councilmember Appel. I think that's a prudent thing to do. Let's make sure we got all our ducks lined up. So unless there's a motion to defer, I did not hear a motion to defer. I would then call the question.
Well, let's try it up the flagpole. I'll make a motion to defer.
Okay. There's a motion to defer. Is there a second to the motion to defer?
Second.
Okay. All right. So there's a motion to defer. All those in favor of a motion to defer signify by saying aye.
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 That'd be 3 and 2 no. So the motion will be deferred until the next real estate committee meeting in January. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. All right. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Barr. Yes, sir.
What would the date of that be?
Our next committee council meeting is January 26th.
6th. So it'd probably be the 25th.
25th.
And the second question, is there anything that we can try to produce to assist in making the decisions by the committee members between now and then?
any information that we have, Mr. Barr, concerning the original transaction between the city and the School of Law, and then those other intervening acts that occurred. And I remember we had discussions back in 2017. And again, of course, we mentioned what we did in 2019. So if we can just get all of those documents lined up, if there were minutes or memorandums of understanding or contracts, those things would be a big help to us. And the initial transaction, Ms. Rodina, took place when between the city and the School of Law? What year was that?
2005.
2005. So if there's anything either in the form of minutes or other documents at the original 2005 transaction, or the minutes that the actions of council leading up to that 2005 transaction, any homework y'all can dig up on that would be, I think, appreciated as
Okay.
well.
Well, we'll collaborate with Mr. Craver and get together everything we can.
Okay.
And I'll help put together some things too. We've got some minutes already and we'll go back and try to pull some more.
All right. Thank y'all for y'all's cooperation. Thank you for y'all patience. And let's see, would we get us back on the agenda for our mid-January meeting. Thank y'all very much.
Great.
All right. We're going to move on to item number D. And is Ms. Yarborough on our call, or is Mr. Kronsberg going to take this one?
I'll move for approval.
All right. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. This is dealing with the rental agreement with the St. Andrews Parish Parks and Playground for the pool space. I think that we're just continuing what we had already discussed with this. So
Right.
any further discussion on item number D?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item E is request to authorize the mayor to execute a resolution approving the submission of an application for Greenbelt funds. Who's taking this item for us? Mr. Kronsberg?
I can address this one.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, and Mayor Tecklenburg. This is a resolution requested for you all to, really the resolution allows us to make application to the Greenbelt program for a parcel of land at the end of Howell Avenue on James Island. As part of the Greenbelt program, like I mentioned, this resolution is a requirement to make application. So this is a 3.6 acre parcel of land at the end of Howell Avenue. The project came to my desk not too long ago, and it would be a multi-jurisdictional application with the county, the city, and the town of James Island. So what would happen is we're currently negotiating with the property owner and their realtor on a price. We have an appraisal that we received from the county, and if once we get the purchase price nailed down, we'll fill that into the Greenbelt application, which is complete other than that dollar amount. So the goal of this Greenbelt purchase would be, with the three-party agreement, would be that the county would then make some created wetland and drainage improvements on this parcel of land, perhaps a 2.5 acre pond with a created wetland around it that would improve drainage issues in this watershed. The applications are due on the 29th, so that's why this resolution is coming for you today. And again, as the negotiations continue, hopefully we can get a sales price by tomorrow and then get that application filled out with the correct information.
Mr. Mayor?
So just a couple points I'd like to add to Jason's remarks is that it's clear first of all, of course, approval of this resolution is by no means an approval by the city to buy anything as of this point. It really just authorizes us to proceed. But I will share that the projected purchase price will be less than the appraised value. We have a willing seller who's sympathetic to our cause, so to speak. Not saying he's willing to give it to us, but I do expect the purchase price to be well below the appraised value, number one. Number two, I have made requests to both the town of James Island and the county to partner with us on the Greenbelt application and share with us in the eventual costs, kind of like we did, Councilmember Waring, with that property out on Highway 61, where the county was the primary applicant, but we put some of our Greenbelt funds in.
Right.
So I've reached out to Mayor Woolsey and to Councilmember Honeycutt, and my expectation is that we'll get a partnership at the eventual application. But since a parcel is in the city limits, it made sense for us to be the lead applicant on this proposal to the Greenbelt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, I don't think we had a motion yet, so
I move for approval.
is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further
second.
discussion?
I just have a couple questions. I appreciate having been on the discussion when Councilmember Honeycutt from the County Council brought this to a few of us who represent constituents on James Island. And at that point, it wasn't clear about the town's involvement. So Mayor, could you shine a light on that? Why is the town of James Island in on this when it's not really part of their territory?
Well, the part of their territory, I think, is in the watershed, and maybe it would just be, they haven't approved it, by the way. I've just asked the mayor, and he's got to check with his city council. So we don't know what action they're going to take or what level they'll participate at yet.
And just to remind ourselves, this is in the north quadrant of the Central Park Basin. You know, the city the city and the county contracted with AECom to do that original study of the variety of improvements that could happen in the basin. I think, in full disclosure, I'm not opposed to this. I do continue to wonder, you know, how much of an advance, or however we're talking about the funds that haven't been, you know, accumulated yet in the sales tax revenue. But I guess that's for a more holistic discussion of Greenbelt opportunities down the road. But I think in light of full disclosure, this property was not a key ingredient to the improvements of this part of the Central Park Basin when the AECom study came forward. We know that we have to improve drainage that has a very big impact on Howell Avenue. The flooding that happens there is increasing and bad and needs a lot of improvement. But I think we wouldn't expect Matt Fountain and the County West Linker, who was on the discussion meeting with all of us, to you know, make it a huge priority if they were pushed on, if they had to pick between this piece of property and some other costs that we know we're going to have in the basin. So I hope it happens, but I do think that, you know, we should all be aware of that.
Yeah, and this is just simply to give the mayor the authorization to move forward. We're not expending any funds right now, and we haven't gotten any kind of agreement. It's just to submit the application for those funds. Mr. Mayor?
So although I will acknowledge, Councilmember Jackson, that this is not some silver bullet to solve all the drainage problems in that water basin, both the county and the city believe it will have some benefit. So if you add that to the fact that we can utilize Greenbelt funds, given the nature of the property, and the county has actually agreed to do the drainage improvement, so they'll be paying for those. To me, it seems like a no-brainer. If we get some benefit and we're able to use these other programmatic dollars, and the county's doing the improvements, I say, why not?
May I respond? I totally agree, Mayor. You know, like I said, I'm in favor of this. I just feel like, you know, we should be aware that sooner or later we're going to have to make some potentially strategic decisions, and I would hope that we'll continue to fine tune our criteria for how we actually put our reputation on the line for Greenbelt funds use. And hopefully the county will create a stormwater fund, because that's exactly what we need out of sales tax dollars. We need a way to, more overtly apply for stormwater improvements. And this is sort of it's a good use, but it's not a direct set of, problems or solutions to the problems that we know we're going to continue to have with flooding. So anyway, I'm sorry to run on. I do feel like it's a good, I will vote in favor of sending the application in.
Let's call, any further discussion? We'll call the question. All those in favor of item number E signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I understand we're deferring number F.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I know we're way over time, and I apologize that I was late to the meeting, and I guess it was mentioned that this item is going to be deferred, and I don't have a good argument for why it can't be, because we didn't get any sample, we didn't get any contract or other background documents in order to say yes to this. But I feel like this could potentially be the last public opportunity that some of us have to speak to this item. I hope not, but I would not blame the Humanities Foundation for having to consider whether this is a deal that makes sense for them to continue to work on. I'm very disappointed that we are still in a sort of a cycle of chasing our tail about a lot of the hairy details about this. This was the keystone of the project that the Community Development Committee heard from a variety of our city staff and the Humanities Foundation leadership and all of us about the east side, the America Street neighborhood that has flooding and affordable housing and gentrification wrapped up into the themes that we know are happening all over the peninsula, and especially on the east side of our community. And we could not have been more excited and encouraging and enthusiastic about the concepts and the actual land use changes that needed to happen to make the vision that was crafted between Alan Davis and our departed planning director and his staff in showing us that we could swap some land that the Humanities Foundation has gone out on a limb to put under contract. And then we would take over the land that could be used for drainage improvements. And we would authorize that Humanities Foundation to build affordable housing, deeply affordable housing in this community that needs it desperately. So the fact that we are still here, this contract should have come to us, I think, back in October, but certainly in November. And then we expected it in December. And here we are in January needing to defer it. And now their backs are to the wall, needing to beg their seller about deferring a closing that we have a countdown toward the VCC that we know is required, that the city is responsible to do according to this agreement. And we're not ready to pull the trigger on any of it. And I'm really grieved about this. I just found out about this today. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to talk to all the parties, outside of our public square here, but I do feel like we need to have an on record. This is not right. We have led a private partner who has a reputation up and down the Carolinas and Virginia for doing the exact kind of work that we are desirous of having them do here in Charleston, and we haven't been able to make it work. And I know there's moving parts and everybody can claim a reason, some part of the elephant for what needed to be done. But honestly, we had a contract that we could have authorized the mayor to sign today, and in 45 days, we could have worked out all the details. We could have satisfied our outside counsel who's being brought in to manage the real estate closing of this on our behalf. We could have worked through some of the concept for the stormwater. So we would have alleviated some of the most unknown concerns about how we're going to be doing that on the first property to be developed. But yet, here we are. It's been automatically deferred. We don't have any documents. I'm not confident that the Humanities Foundation is going to stay in this with us. This is giving me PTSD from my work as a nonprofit developer in Virginia. You know, you get so far with the public entity and then the rug is pulled out from under you. And I'm not accusing anyone of not wanting this to go forward. I'm just saying we could have done this if we'd worked as a team. I know the holidays came into play. I know lots of other conflicts, but honestly, I feel like we need to take responsibility. This was a failure of our leadership to put a vision forward that we all agreed was one of the best holistic game plans for this part of our peninsula. So I'm just really sorry. It makes
Thank you,
me.
Councilmember Jackson.
very unhappy.
Giona, do you want to weigh in on this, why this is being deferred, or Ms. Rodina?
There are a number of issues, and I'd be happy to reach out to Councilmember Jackson privately regarding some of the concerns that we had. I mean, I think everybody is interested, and I know it, intent on moving forward. There just have been some moving parts, which frankly were not necessarily in the best interest of the city. So I'm happy to contact Councilmember Jackson and talk to her about some of the concerns that we had about moving forward on the particular deal that's in front of council right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If we want to discuss this as a committee at this point, I'd like to move that we go into executive session. We have a pending contract agreement with Humanities Foundation.
I second that.
All right. So before we go into executive session, if we could just leapfrog, we got one more item to take care of,
Okay.
which is a annexation. If y'all don't mind, let's take care of that, because Councilman, we're really.
I know, man. My rest commit. Well, we got a quorum right here. So anyway, we got
Yeah.
quorum right here.
I
did.
move
So
for approval on item-
let's hold off one second. We'll go into an executive session. But first, if y'all don't mind, go into item G on this annexation.
Yes, sir. I just move for approval on item G.
Well, let's don't have two motions on the floor. I withdraw
No.
my second. And if the mayor withdraws his motion for executive
Yeah.
session.
So if y'all don't mind, we can go to item G first before we finish our discussion on item F. And I'll entertain a motion to approve item G, which is annexation. Is there a-
Councilor Jackson moved, I seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion on item G? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right, item G is approved.
Aye.
All right, now, we can
Now,
go
Mr.
back to
Mayor.
item F, and there's a motion, I think, to go into the executive session.
Yeah, I heard the mayor make that motion, so I second.
All right. So, all those in favor of going to executive session, signify by saying aye.
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 So, Madam Clerk, can you stick us into a breakout room?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jennifer. I'm gonna, how many people need to go into the breakout room?
I think all the members of this committee, Ms. Giona and Ms. Rodina, and is any other, Susan, anybody else we need to, from the legal department?
Probably Lee Bailey and Matt Fountain, if he's on the line. And then
And
Chip,
Susan.
if he would like to join us.
It probably needs to be on as well, Susan.
Mhm.
Who's that, Ms. Giona?
Chip McQueenie.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So,
Hold on
Madam
one-
Clerk, does that help you?
Yes, sir. Hold on one
Okay.
moment, and y'all should receive an invitation shortly. And
Everybody sit tight, don't touch any buttons. We'll be moving to a breakout room.
Velda, if you can discontinue the stream up at the top.
Okay,